Call this meeting to order. We are meeting in public. Welcome to meeting number 95 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. Today, for a briefing on the temporary immigration measures initiated in response to the ongoing conflicts in Sudan and Gaza, we have the Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship, Honorable Mark Miller, with the department officials. Madam Kwan, you have something to say?
I do. Before we begin, Mr. Chair, I know that because of votes, we've lost almost 45 minutes to the time to which the minister is supposed to appear for 2 hours, and then officials for 1 hour for today's committee meeting. So I would like to hear from you. How will we be making up that time? We'll be extending the meeting tonight so that we can get the full 2 hours with the minister. If not, then I'm
coming to that, Madam. If you can give me a time, and at the end you will know. So let me finish up, and then I'll give you the floor. Joining him are department officials, Deputy Minister Dr. Harpreet Singh Kosher, Assistant Deputy Minister Jennifer McIntyre, and also Director General Mr. Kareem Virani. Welcome to the meeting. Minister, you've been very accessible to this committee. I know almost every week we are sitting, you are here, and want to thank you for making the time to come and be here with the members. The hard stop for the minister is at 6:30. So he was here because of the votes, as Madam Kwan mentioned, because he does not have a time today to go beyond 6:30, and the hard stop with the officials will be at 7:30. There are other 6 motions for him to come back to the committee, so it's up to the committee to make that decision. So I give the floor to Madam Kwan. Madam Kwan, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. At the appropriate time, Mr. Chair, I intend to move a motion to have the minister to come back to make up for the lost time. The other times to which the minister is scheduled to appear before committee is on other issues. This is actually on Gaza and the many family members who are wanting accountability, transparency from the government and answers from the government, and they think they deserve that. So this motion specifically calls for the government and for the minister to appear before the committee for the full 2 hours. And because of votes, and it's not because of the minister's fault, we have lost that time, but we need to make up that time. And at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair, I will be moving that motion to that effect.
Okay, the motion is in order. Is it will of the committee to do that? Anyone want to speak?
I thought she would move at the appropriate time. I don't think she moved.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't want to take any more time away from the discussion with the minister. So at the appropriate time, I will be moving that motion to bring the minister back to make up for the time that has been lost for today.
So you have not moved the motion yet. Okay, thank you. So with that, Minister, as usual, welcome to the committee. And before I start, honorable members, please, if you want Minister to stop, please raise your hand so I do not eat into your time, and I have told members personally, so you have your full time, and I'm equitable with every member. So, Minister, please keep an eye. If I raise my hand, then that means, please wrap up, and we go back to the members. Thank you. With this, we'll give Minister 5 minutes to start. Minister, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. I do promise to behave. Je tiens tout d'abord à souligner que nous sommes réunis ici sur...
Let me begin by acknowledging that we're meeting today on the traditional unceded territories of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Thank you for inviting me to discuss measures that my department has launched in response to the crises in Sudan and Gaza.
Sudan and Gaza are devastating and have left Canadians anxious to bring their loved ones to safety. It's also not lost on me that the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza continues through Ramadan, a holy time meant to be cherished with family and friends. After fighting broke out in Sudan last spring, my department responded by supporting the assisted departure of Canadian citizens, permanent residents, locally engaged staff, and their families. malgré les difficultés liées à assurer le bon.
Despite challenges in keeping Canada's Embassy and Visa Application Centre in Sudan running, we are continuing to process applications from Sudan through our global network. We have prioritized applications for temporary and permanent residents, including refugee applications. We also waived most fees for Canadians and permanent residents who need replacement documents and other assistance to leave Sudan. Sudanese nationals who want to stay in Canada during the conflict can apply to change or extend their temporary resident status free of charge through October.
We also launched a humanitarian pathway to permanent residence for people living in Sudan where the conflict began, including non-Sudanese nationals. Their Canadian family will support them here and help them integrate with the assistance of our settlement services. Every crisis requires a tailored and different response, and the situation in Gaza calls for Canada to respond in ways that meet the unique demands of those on the ground seeking refuge. Nous accordons la priorité aux demandes de résidence permanente.
We prioritize permanent residence applications from the region within most family-based streams. And for Israelis and Palestinians in Canada who feel unsafe returning, we have waived fees to change or extend their temporary residence status, including applying for study and open work permits.
Canadians remain understandably deeply worried for their extended family in Gaza. In January, we launched measures to offer them a temporary safe haven here. Family members holding Palestinian passports can apply for temporary resident visas, and their Canadian family will support them for a year once they arrive. They'll also have access to interim federal health coverage and obviously federal and settlement services. The policy has up to now been currently accepting 1,000 applications into processing. And as we monitor the situation, we're evaluating the needs to update that response and to increase the application of people that are covered by our measures. I do not have a specific additional number to offer the committee today, but members should be aware that our teams are working on it. And in the past couple of weeks, we have started to increase, we can get into this in the question and answer, the number of codes that are being issued to people seeking to exit Gaza. Usually, applicants need to submit fingerprints and a photo before they are moved out of a country. But since my department has no presence in Gaza to collect biometrics, applicants provide enhanced biometric information on their forms. This allows us to do preliminary security screening while they're still in Gaza so we can finalize their applications faster once they leave. Biometrics are then collected in Cairo. This is standard practice in crises where we have no presence on the ground. This is something that we used in Afghanistan as well. Nous avons bien évidemment entendu les inquiétudes.
We have, of course, heard concerns about the form, and so we have altered or removed some questions. And since we know that applicants may not have access to all the required documents, I have directed my department and officers to be flexible and to assess each situation on a case-by-case basis.
Movement out of Gaza remains limited and out of Canada's control. Though I'm frustrated by this, I can only imagine the desperation of families in Canada must feel as they wait for their loved ones to come. And I know many are gathered here physically today and are feeling that. We're also working with local authorities at every level to make sure people's names who we've submitted are approved to exit Gaza, and we'll leave no stone unturned in our campaign to have families safely reunited with their families in Canada. Je vous remercie et je répondrai volontiers avec.
Thank you, and I will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Minister. Before I go to the round, I would welcome two members here. Mr. Erskine Smith is here online, and we are also joined by Mr. Morris. And it's my understanding that Mr. Bruno Duceppe will share his time with Mr. Morris at some point in time. So with this, I will go to the first round, and Mr. Kimmich, for 6 minutes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister. So I'm going to start with just a simple numbers question, Minister. Can you give us an update on both programs, Sudan and Gaza? How many individuals have come in through those programs? And then separately, how many individuals have come in through all government programs from the region due to the conflict?
Honourable Minister.
So breaking these down into, the program in Sudan, first off, the program has received, as of March 13th, so as of a few days ago, 2,667 applications, and 306 applications representing 689 persons have been accepted into this. When it comes to people that have come since the crisis and the terrorist attack on October 7th, there have been, in various measures together, put them all together, and then I'll break them down, Tom, into the specific pathway, which is obviously limited to 14 people. There have been physically from Israel 1,661 people that were evacuated, 839, which include Canadians and permanent residents from Gaza itself, and from the West Bank, 79 individuals. We have currently, as part of the temporary public policy, accepted 986 complete applications into processing as of March 4th of 2024. There have been 14 people who have taken matters into their own hands and have been successfully able to exit Rafah gates, and that number, as I mentioned earlier, is 14.
So Chair, so my next question, Minister, then is, you said 14 exited through the Rafah crossing on their own, correct? So I was going to ask you, out of those that have been issued or have their applications accepted for both programs, Sudan and Gaza, how many have physically come to Canada?
So with respect to Sudan, there have, I believe the answer is zero. This is a program that was just launched. We expect them to land physically, we hope, later in the year or early in 2025. And with respect, and so there's some nuances to be drawn here. There are a number of people over I would say, the December period, January through March, that we have been able to extract on an ad hoc basis. To children and a woman under dire medical exigent circumstances, we were able to get to Cairo for the medical procedure in question. But we have not. There have been some of them have come to Canada, but the number is very limited and negligible compared to the ambition of this program.
Member.
So thank you, Chair. So Minister, I guess can you provide perhaps for both programs then where those with approved applications, in which country are they in right now?
We could provide that to you at a later date with respect to the program that we launched to exit for family members that are in Gaza. Those people are largely still situate in Gaza, with the exceptions that I mentioned. And in Sudan, there could be largely Sudan, but there could be other countries where they're physically present currently.
Thank you, Chair. So I went to look at the UNHCR's update for the Sudan emergency response. It was numbers that were being provided for Egypt. It says there are 508,827 people, according to UNHCR, that have fled Sudan. They're claiming about 500,000 of those people are Sudanese nationals, and then 8,827, again, this is their numbers, are individuals of other nationalities have crossed into Egypt between April 2023 and March 2024. And these are numbers that the UNHCR has received from the government of Egypt. Out of that group, how many of those have applications approved to come to Canada?
Honourable Minister.
That, but we could get you that number at a later date.
That's fine.
Honourable Member.
Thank you, Chair. So what is the, I guess, security interaction, and have you spoken to your counterpart in Egypt?
Honourable Minister.
Our officials do coordinate on an active basis.
Is it only happening at the officials level? There's no ministerial contact?
With respect to Egypt, yes.
Okay. And in the case of Israel?
I have spoken with the ambassador in particular, and obviously our heads of mission have spoken. The Prime Minister on a number of topics has spoken to Mr. Netanyahu, and as well as Benny Gantz, as well as others, and that's not to mention the work that Minister Jolie does as part of her job.
And in the case of the Palestinian Authority?
I have not spoken to anyone in the PA. As you know, Minister Jolie met with Mr. Abbas. And we do, as security measures, do coordinate at times with those, but on an officials basis.
So my question then is going to go kind of like the interaction of officials then. Can you describe the security relationship then? Because the reaction of the government of Egypt has been different for those who are to come through the Rafah crossing versus those who have fled the civil war in Sudan. So can you explain what that interaction is like and how that's perhaps complicated the government of Canada's response?
Well, certainly, and it's a highly pertinent question, MP Kamich. This is not an area where it is easy to extract folks. Correspondingly, it has been easier to have people exit Ukraine, for example, and perhaps even Sudan. Given the gravity of the crisis in Gaza, there is an intense security perimeter that you are familiar with. The coordination in order to get people out requires interaction with the government of Egypt. It requires cooperation with COGAT, which is a wing of the Israeli Minister of Defense. And when we submit lists, which we have with respect to the Palestinians, which have family members here and we are trying desperately to get out, we have submitted a list of well north of 300 people.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Kamich. We will go to Madam Kaibaga for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to go back to some of those numbers that you just talked about. I wasn't sure if I heard the answer on how many people have exited through this specific program for Gazans through the official Rafah crossing.
It has been very few and far between. There are 14 people that have exited. We have, on an ad hoc basis, been able to extract people, but through intense diplomatic efforts, but not as a result of the names that we have submitted in due course to COGAT, amongst other, on the list that we have. And that is the preferred way of getting people out in a way that doesn't involve intermediaries and bribing people of dubious backgrounds.
And the 14 people are specifically through the program, or is it people that got out on their own with their own families with their own money?
These are people that got out by their own efforts.
So not from this program then?
Not through the efforts of us trying to extract people
So it's fair to say that nobody has come through with this program?
They are covered by the program, but they are not covered by the official way in which we are trying to get people out. They have gotten out on their own.
Is there a way to address the concerns regarding the code requirement for Gazans to be able to submit for temporary resident visas?
Sorry,
the code requirement. There's been a code that has been submitted, and it's you receive it once in a while, and I think it's been stopped now. Can we get some information on more of the code? And I've never seen the code before.
As of last week, we started increasing the codes, and we will be increasing the codes in increments of 250 by week, just to control.
And what is the rationale behind the code?
Well, it's part of the process. It's part of when you initiate the application process. You issue people a code as part of their further step in the process. I can defer to officials to describe the step plan.
Is this a code that we've used before? Maybe the official can help answer.
Honorable Deputy Minister Kosher.
Thank you, Chair, for the answer. Question. So basically, the code is built in a systematic way to make sure that we have the complete applications. So when there is an interest from any of the person who is an anchor relative here to bring someone from the Gaza, they are actually applying through the web form, which triggers a code. That code is actually allowing them an ability to submit an application.
I'm so sorry. Just because of the interest of time, if I cut you, I apologize ahead of
No
time. I'm just more curious to know, like, if this is something we've done before, or is this like a special code for Gazans?
That is a code specifically for this program.
And the program of using codes has never been used before, but for this program, for specifically this community.
I'm not understanding the question, Mr.
Maybe you can submit it later and let us know if this is something that's been done before. I want to be able to use my time appropriately. I do have another question as well. Maybe the official can help answer this question, and the minister as well. We've heard concerns from our communities that Gazans, when they're applying, they've been asked like extensive questions that have to do with social media, identifying like specific marks that are on their bodies. I've never heard of this before. Can you clarify if this is something that we usually do, and why are we asking people for social media? Is this regular practice?
So there would be a variety of reasons to get obviously a complete background of the people that are applying. They are not Canadian citizens or permanent residents. This is something that was used, for example, in Afghanistan. Obviously, there are at times security reasons for that in order to get the full profile of someone that we are trying to identify and get out in a very difficult context. But obviously, there's also the humanitarian concern of making sure people just have to stay alive. So what I've asked my officials to do in this context is to show some operational flexibility given the humanitarian concern. So yes, it has been used before. The challenge, obviously, is not being able to do biometrics in place in Gaza. So we have to be relatively certain before we take the next step of submitting a list that will be scrubbed by a party or parties with their own security concerns, and then move on to the next stage of biometrics.
Can we maybe get the officials to submit through our committee other examples of where we've asked folks to submit social media? I want to go to the next question again because of time. The cap on 1,000 applicants for the program, if we could get an understanding as to why this decision was made on the cap of 1,000, as well as for the cap for Sudanese. How did IRCC decide on 3,250? And we also have heard that this also has not had anybody come to Canada. What's the plan to actually make it work?
Honourable Minister.
So in the case of the latter question, MP Kaibanga, the cap and the work that we did with respect to the Sudanese program, which has a permanent aspect to it, was one that we worked with a number of Sudanese umbrella organizations across Canada. It has to work. It has to do with the capacity of the diaspora members, our own internal planning and planification. That is something that at times can be a bit of an art and a bit of a science, but we came to that number, the 3,000 plus, that on the theory that it would translate to about 5,000 actual people, and then on the Gaza pathway, there's a little bit more context in it in and of its temporary measure for a number of reasons, including geopolitical considerations, but also the fact that we did this in a relatively expedited time frame over the Christmas period, being unique compared to our similarly situated partners who have not done this. So we are kind of out there as an example of a unique program that we didn't know exactly what the numbers were, and so we established this cap in that optic and context, knowing that inevitably we would probably have to increase it once we got a sense of the numbers. We do now have a better sense of the numbers and are moving to show some flexibility and decrease them.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Madam Kaibaga. We will go to Mr. Brunner-Desaep. Mr. Brunner-Desaep, go ahead for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being with us today. I apologize for being with you via Zoom. I had no choice today. I'd like to talk about a very specific case with you, which may give you an idea of what it means to try to understand the program that you've implemented. You just said that you implemented it during the holiday period. I have someone who got in touch with me, Ms. Nibal Lubad. She is a doctor, a Canadian of Palestinian origin, who lives near Niagara, and she has family in Gaza. Her two parents managed to leave in extremis. They left Gaza and ended in Egypt. She got in touch with us because she tried with her Conservative MP in the region and she received no assistance. So people sent her to me, and I tried to get in touch with people in your office, and we tried to get her parents out of there. Her father is Khalil Lubad, and her mother is Jessica Lubad. Unfortunately, it's been hell. I think it was December 22nd or 23rd during the holidays, as you know, Mr. Minister. I work all the time, regardless of the hour of the day or night, and it was the holiday period. And here today, we have no response from the department. requests were sent to Nibal requesting sending missing documents, which had already been sent, so she sent them again. And since then, your department has been completely silent. I would like to have your assurance today that somebody from your team and your office will get in touch with me after this session so that we can resolve this matter and bring these people here to Canada. First of all, thank you. Second, I'm glad and delighted to hear that at least some people from her family are safe. Whether it's in Egypt, we'd expect that if it's family members subject to the parameters of our program, they could come to who could come to Canada. This is the first time that you've mentioned this to me live, and I'd be happy to work with my team on follow-up. But please understand that we will make the effort. Obviously, the effort now is to get people out who have family connections in Canada, and to get them out of Gaza so that these people be safe and they can exit to Egypt and then ultimately they could come to Canada. Mr. Duceppe, we will work on this with my team. Excellent. Mr. Brunel Duceppe?
Second, I think bells are ringing. Is there a unanimous consent in the committee to continue and stop? No? So we don't have a unanimous consent, so I have to suspend the meeting. Meeting back to order. Mr. Bruno de Sepp have 3 minutes left from his time, and it's my understanding that he's going to take a minute and he's going to share 2 minutes of his time with Mr. Morris. Mr. Bruno de Sepp, if that is correct, please go ahead for the remaining 1 minute.
Oui, c'est super d'être par Zoom.
Yes, it's just great to be here on Zoom. Sorry about my hairdo. So, very briefly, Minister. Hang on, let me connect.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Can you hear me? Yes.
Oui. Vous m'entendez?
Yeah, I'm here. I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Minister, you said at the last minute you had to set up this program. It was during the holidays and it was very difficult. 2 years ago, I proposed to your government an emergency stream to have with the IRCC whenever an international crisis would, a considerable international crisis would occur. That was never implemented. Had that been the case, you wouldn't be in this situation. You yourself said that your officials were looking into the possibility of implementing this. 2 years ago, I gave this to you as a turnkey idea. If we had done this, we would have had a much different approach. Are you going to implement an emergency stream at IRCC for international crises, yes or no? And if so, when?
Minister, go ahead, please.
Je peux pas spéculer si on aurait.
I cannot speculate had we been able to act more quickly. I know that the crisis exists. It's in place. There are human beings who are devoted to that cell, Mr. Member. What our partners internationally have told us is that they were surprised at the speed with which we were able to implement this, especially during the holiday period. I know the effort that my deputy minister has made and the replacement made in order to make it possible to set up the system so quickly. Were they, Mr. Minister, Mr. Morris, over to you.
Juste une seconde.
Just 1 second. Were they surprised with what you obtained? Who they? Your international partners, were they surprised? They're not surprised. They found this exceptional that we were able to implement this. And they are just as frustrated as we are that the results that they themselves were able to obtain on their other streams were not positive. But the reality is that this is an example, and it's an example to follow. The fact remains that this was not the success that we had hoped for. Thank you. The example to follow is that there are no results. I've turned the floor over to Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. You have only 20 seconds of his time, so go ahead, please.
Well, Mr. Minister, I'm glad you got to hear directly from Palestinian Canadians whose families are in Gaza. Their frustration reflects that of folks in my community, including CIMM, who I mentioned we spoke about over a month ago. Brothers, sister, and mother remain in Gaza. Some have access codes, some don't, as well as Maha and Saja, whose mom, Rada, has a TRV. She still is not on the evacuation list. She's still not out. We have reports of other countries who have been successful. Australia, Italy, Spain, of getting family members out. If they've been able to, why hasn't Canada?
Thank you. Time is up, Minister. Briefly, if you can answer.
There are no other countries that have a similar program of this scope. Australia did, in fact, issue a number of visas. I don't know if they would be saying that it has been successful. Other countries are talking to us. There are at least 6 or 7 that want to reproduce this model. They don't want to reproduce one that is that will not be successful, but I think we all owe it to ourselves to try. As you know, we have been able to extract folks on an ad hoc basis, but obviously not with the scope and ambition that we have wanted to, and for that, I don't think we can call this a success. International support and cooperation is key to this, and again, I can't reiterate enough how there are elements that are not within our control and are immensely frustrating. It doesn't mean that we should stop trying. I knew when I put in place this measure that it may not be successful, But I thought it was a
Thank you,
good measure
Minister. It's
because
been
we needed to take the
7:30
risk
now.
because of the people behind us and the people expecting us to have a humanitarian response to a catastrophe.
Thank you. We are already over a minute and a half. So I will go to Madam Kwan. Madam Kwan, you have 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How many people cross the Rafah border as a result of the government program? Just a straight-up number.
Well, you'd have to clarify the question as a result of the codes or visas that they or applications that they have received, or because they thought they could get to Egypt and then have
No,
the benefit
how
of the
many
program.
people managed to cross the border as a result of the government special immigration measure?
So other than the ad hoc numbers that we have been able to get out individually, the number is 14.
The ad hoc number, is it because of the government's program or because they cross on their own?
So there are some people that were able to cross on their own by paying intermediaries. There are some that we have advocated for directly because of their medical conditions that were directly the result of the intervention of the
So
government
how
of Canada
many-
at the highest levels.
How many people Canada brought across the border as a result of Canadian government's actions?
Well, so, and I assume that by that you don't mean the
I don't mean the people who did it on their own. I mean the people who actually
Madam Kwan, if
had
you
the
can let
government's
Minister
assistance.
speak. Honorable Minister.
I know you're trying to complete my sentence, but that wasn't where I was going. There are obviously 839 Canadians and permanent residents that we were able to extract. But as a result of the special program that we have put in place, there are none through these lists that we have submitted to COGAT and Egyptian authorities that have been able to be extracted.
Thank you.
According to
Thank
that
you,
program.
Minister. So none have actually come across. So the people who've come across so far, they've done it on their own. So the minister only says 14. Turns out, actually, through my work, from my office, we have 84 people on the list who's crossed on their own. Not because of the government's assistance. The media got a number of 110, but the minister only has 14. You wonder what is going on with the government when they can't even get that number right. Now, I want to actually ask the minister this question. Of the people that has gotten on this list, 986 of them, how many of them actually were issued a TRV from the government?
Because of our inability to do biometrics and issue visas inside Gaza, they would have to have proceeded to Cairo, which they have not, to get the biometrics and then get the
So
corresponding
none.
TRV.
So nobody's got a TRV. So then what about the people who managed to get across the border on their own without the government's help as part of this application process? Why haven't they gotten a TRV?
ADM McIntyre can answer that question.
Madam McIntyre, go ahead, please.
So the number 14 is the number of TRVs that have been issued to individuals who've crossed the border and who have applications under the public policy. It is true that other individuals are crossing, and when they come to Cairo and make contact with our embassy, we are processing their applications.
So 14 people got a TRV because they crossed on their own, but not one person through the government's programs being able to get a TRV. Okay, so we got that straight. So the minister said he submitted 300 names to GOCAC. So why only 300? 986 codes has been issued. What happened to the rest of them?
Honorable Minister. Deputy Minister, please go ahead.
So we submitted all of those 287 in terms of making sure that we have a complete family unit. Because if there are people who are applied, the 986 who are eligible, if there is one or two of them who are actually unable, we cannot confirm their identity, there is an eligibility or admissibility, we cannot tier or separate the families. So the one family unit has gone to them, and that is the number as it. And as we get more information, we keep on adding those numbers. And every week we send more numbers and more names to COGAT.
So what is the reason why people are not getting their, or why are people getting the security blocked? The names that have been submitted. What is the
Minister.
reason that Israel or Egypt has provided to the government?
If I was aware of that, I would not be able to provide you that information.
Honorable Member.
So far, nobody's gotten approval, and the minister can't say or is not aware of why they're all being blocked.
Honorable
Right?
Minister.
So we're not talking about all. There have been a list. There's been a list of well over 300 submitted to COGAT. Ideally,
But how
they
many
will
has
get
been approved out of that 300?
Well, because people need to exit and they need to get to Cairo to do their additional biometrics. There are none that have been, by virtue of the program, issued a TRV, but they require consent from both COGAT and the Egyptian authorities.
How many has received consent out of the
that
300?
list, we have not had any success under the list.
Not one.
submitted.
So, okay, so 300 names been submitted, not one has received consent, not one has received a TRV through this process. All right, and the minister wants to blame the NDP for their failure. Set that aside for a minute. For the family members who have died, waiting for their codes, to which I just spoke with a family member here who advised that at least 49 people have been killed as they wait for this process to proceed. Will they be refunded on their cost of their application?
Honourable Minister.
Sorry, just rephrase that question for a second.
49 people at least have been killed waiting for their application to be processed, waiting for their code. And because they've now been killed, will they be refunded for the cost of their application?
Honourable Minister.
I would assume that would be the case, yes.
Honourable
All right.
Member.
For the people who've crossed over to Egypt, who are waiting, how long does the minister expect the processing time to be for those individuals to get their TRVs to get out to Canada for to safety?
You have 9 seconds to answer, Minister.
Again, it's a limited subset, but I would expect once biometrics are completed, rather expeditiously.
What's the average processing time?
I think I'll defer to officials, but given the low numbers, it wouldn't be an accurate sample.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member and Minister. Minister, thank you for staying over time. I appreciate that. I know you were going to leave at 6:30, but you accommodated 2 members. Thank you, and I'm going to suspend the meeting for a few seconds or minute before we start with the officials. And we will start with Mr. Reddycop. Mr. Reddycop, let me see if the officials are ready. Deputy Minister, are you ready? Or you need time? Ready? Okay, so we will start with Mr. Reddycop for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Thank you for being here and answering our questions. Just wanted to talk about some general questions about how Canada deals with people that have passports from entities that may not be recognized as a country. So, for instance, the Liberal government currently recognizes Israel as a state, but not Palestine. However, they do recognize the Palestinian Authority can and does issue passports for people in those territories. That said, before I get into the issue specifically, I just want to know more generally about the process. So, what is the estimation by IRCC as to the percentage of people who arrive at our border that may have passports but are not from countries that are recognized by Canada?
Deputy Minister.
Thank you for the question. The countries which are recognized in terms of entering Canada are mostly the one which are through the ICAO guidelines, which is a standard which we actually adhere to. And those name of the countries are provided to us, and it's an international component. For us to actually see what country really is represented on the passport, we have a full list, which is mostly, it's been internationally made clear that that would be the one which would be identified as the one which we would allow the entry into.
So by that you mean that there are no people have entered Canada who do not have passports from valid countries?
Deputy Minister.
Mr. Chair, what I'm referring to is a list which is provided by ICAO, and that is the list which we work with. The folks who actually represent with that passport, they are allowed to enter into Canada.
Honorable member.
Okay, so I guess more specifically regarding Gaza, the Palestinian people that are living in the Strip and the program that you're here for today, on your website it says this, I'll quote it, "After entering Canada, in most cases you can stay for up to 3 years as a temporary resident, as long as your passport and biometrics are valid for the entire time. If your passport or biometrics expire in less than 3 years, your status as a temporary resident will expire at the same time. You can apply to extend your status before it expires, but you need to make sure your passport and biometrics are up to date before you apply." So questions about that statement. First, is the Israeli-issued identification card valid for Gazans in lieu of a passport for the purposes of this program?
Deputy Minister.
So the passport through this program, Chair, is actually this particular public policy is referring to a Palestinian Authority-issued passport.
So regarding passports for people from Gaza, they're issued by the Palestinian Authority out of the West Bank and not by Hamas out of Gaza, correct?
Deputy Minister.
I would say that Palestinian Authority is the authority which we are recognizing as the one which is the valid entity.
Okay. What about passports that are issued by the Jordanian government for Gazans for the purposes of this program?
Deputy Minister.
Sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
What about passports that are issued by the Jordanian government for Gazans for the purposes of this program?
Deputy Minister.
If they are Jordanian official, Jordanian residents, or they are actually nationals, Jordanian national, they will be processed accordingly.
Honorable member.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about Egypt. On Canada's Immigration and Refugee Board website, in direct reference to the issue of documents for Gazans, the IRB addresses the issue around Egypt. It clearly states that a person from Gaza requires either a valid identification card issued by Israel or a passport issued by the Palestinian Authority to cross the border into Egypt. So did the Canadian government consult the Egyptian government before announcing this program? I mean, obviously, people have to pass through Egypt, and so I'm just curious if our government consulted with the Egyptian government.
Deputy Minister.
Mr. Chair, the short answer is yes, that we did consult with the Egyptian authorities.
Honorable member.
Okay, so what specifically has Canada done to coordinate with Egypt on the issue of these passports on people coming from Gaza?
Deputy Minister.
Could I?
Ms. McIntyre, go ahead, please. Assistant Deputy Minister.
Thank you very much. So the engagement with the government of Egypt was done primarily by our head of mission and our team in Cairo. What we see often with Palestinians, and we saw this during, maybe I'll back up, IRCC has actually been very engaged in the departure of foreign national residents from Gaza as part of the assisted departure, because many Canadians had family members who were non-Canadian. And so what we saw in that context was often, because of the context in Gaza, people didn't have documents, including their passport, and the Egyptian government was issuing them a document at the airport. And our officers, when they're processing, they don't always need the document. We have lots of ways that we can verify folks' identity, including in conversations and interviews. And so we've been able to have good cooperation in that sense.
Honorable member.
So the department has interviewed people then that come in without proper paperwork, and you're able to determine their identity.
Assistant Deputy Minister.
So when individuals, and we saw this, I'll just be very clear, most of the TRVs that have been issued to date are foreign nationals who came out of Gaza as part of the assisted departure. And we often saw that individuals did not have all of the documents. But as part of the immigration process, the processing, it includes interviews. And so individuals came to Cairo as part of assisted departure, and the IRCC team in Cairo, in parallel with the consular operation, set up an operation where we did interviews in person of family members when they arrived in Cairo. So yes.
Question, Honorable Member.
Can you tell me how many interviews have been done?
Ms. McIntyre.
I can tell you how many TRVs were issued. I would have to confirm because many families we may have done an interview of the parents, for example, but not the children. So that's not a data point I would have. But I think the data point on how many TRVs were issued is a good proxy for the number of interviews.
So just as you don't have that, can you supply that information to the committee, the number of interviews that have been done for this program?
Thank you very much, Honourable Member and Ms. McIntyre and Deputy Minister. So we'll go to Mr. Al-Khoury for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. And welcome to the three members, and thank you for your generosity of coming to enlighten us, answering questions for this committee. So I'd like to ask my first question of Ms. McIntyre. Ms. McIntyre, many people here in Canada, and particularly in my riding, are concerned about the safety of members of their families, their relatives in Gaza. Capping the applications at 1,000 has led to significant concerns. Could you tell us what the objective of this cap was?
Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you for the question. It's true that the government set a cap of 1,000 people, but as you heard just earlier, in the last week, Minister Miller has already said that he is very open to increase the cap if we can have a program in which we are able to successfully move people who are in the Gaza program across the Rafah border so that their applications can be completed. Could you tell us whether other similar measures also include caps? I apologize. Could you repeat the question?
Will have a roof?
En fait, on voit souvent.
Well, we often see, and perhaps the Deputy Minister will intervene here, the cap is often used as a tool in our immigration programs. It is a way of properly managing a program. It is not unique to Gaza. And it's not unique to begin with one ceiling and then to shift it after the government has seen the level of interest that exists for a program.
Remember,
La naissance de nombre, la création, la naissance de.
The birth of that number, the creation of that number 1,000, what was it based on? Thank you for the question. It's a very good question. I think what the minister said earlier was that for the government, it's partly an art and partly a science. And in the case of Gaza, as the minister has already said, the government wanted to implement a program very quickly at the end of December. We do not really have a good estimate of the level of interest, and as the minister has said, now we understand the interest better, the interest among families in Canada in the program, and this is why the minister just said that he is very open to the idea of an increase in the cap.
Dans le cadre de mesures.
When it comes to the measures that were announced, the people affected by this conflict, on both sides, Gaza or Israel, also have access to the settlement services financed by our government, the federal government. Can you explain the impact of this measure?
Assistant Deputy Minister, go ahead, please.
Merci.
Thank you. It is true that people who will be part of this program will have access to the settlement services here in Canada, including language training, for example. Normally, for a temporary program, individuals would not have had access to these services, these settlement services. But the government made a decision in the case of Gaza that these people would have access, even if it's a temporary program.
Honourable member.
Madame, pourriez-vous nous dire
Madam, could you tell us how these services will help them once these people arrive in Canada? How? In what way? Can you explain this? What hope is being given, be it financial or in terms of helping find housing? What impact will this have on people coming to Canada? Thank you. Thank you for the question. These settlement services are based on the idea that the federal government, in order for the federal government to offer support to newcomers, for example, for language training, there may be individuals who speak neither English or French. And so to be able to access language training, we find that this is a good way of offering support to newcomers so as to integrate into our country, even if it's temporary. Also, when it comes to finding housing, opening a bank account, these services are integrated into our program for nationals. And as I've already mentioned, the government decided to offer the same service to individuals who will be part of this program, even if they're temporary. The impact desired was to have them integrate well during their stay in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Elkori. So we will go to Mr. Bruno Desapp for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, my friend, the chair. Let's talk about real things. When I was chair of the Special Committee on Afghanistan, several witnesses told us that there was a shortcoming because there was not an emergency stream whenever an international crisis would occur. There was nothing with RCC for a sudden occurrence. And so I listened carefully and proposed a work plan with an emergency stream with 6 clearly defined terms that could have been implemented at IRCC. The Deputy Minister Fox seemed very interested in this program and told us that she was implementing it. Mr. Deputy Minister, I proposed this 2 years ago, and this is directly connected to the subject of today's meeting, a program that was implemented at the very last minute because of an international crisis. Nothing has been done, whereas you had everything in hand to do something. Could somebody explain to me whether, if there was any interest in this, where things are with that, and why has it not been implemented? Mr. Deputy Minister, perhaps you could answer my question.
Please go ahead.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
I just wanted to mention just in one, just a little bit of a background and then directly to your question. One of the key components in which we can help Canadians, their families, and others is through the public policy. And that's what we have utilized both in Gaza, in Sudan, and other situations. And this has been, and I must say, as you had suggested, the department is actually working on creating that imminent way how we can actually build a frame. And I would say that, Mr. Chair, that we are very advanced in putting together a crisis response framework. That would be something which would allow us to get the lessons learned from what we have seen in Afghanistan, what we are seeing right now in Gaza, and how do we create that standing capacity and the standing way of how we really get to the point quickly as soon as any of such situations arise. So your input and what we heard in the strategic immigration review, and also from all the other stakeholders, we are actually very much far ahead in creating that crisis response framework, which we will actually be able to use in any of these situations.
Member.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc,
Thank you, Chair. So I understand that it's advanced, but it has been 2 years since I proposed it. It was even in the recommendations of the Special Committee on Afghanistan's report. Now you're telling me that it has advanced. It has moved forward. Now you know I'm capable of cooperation and collaboration in the future. That's why I propose things. But when so much time has gone by, I don't understand why it hasn't been implemented. But if you're telling me that it has moved forward in terms of the implementation of an emergency stream, when you're saying advance or move forward, do you have a specific time at which this program will be implemented, this emergency stream?
Go ahead.
Merci encore pour la question.
Thank you again for the question.
I want to mention very clearly is there are a couple of steps, but we are very advanced with the crisis response framework. What we will probably have a very clear idea is that before, and I'm going to be very specific, Mr. Chair, that by fall we should be able to get all the crisis response framework together. There are a couple of steps which we will have to do in terms of creating a standing capacity, and which we are already working on. We have a small team already working on that one, and making sure that we have some way of separating a part of our budget for an immediate action and a situation where we can go to the central agencies to seek more when we need it, if the operation has to be bigger. So I can assure you, Chair, that we are working towards a clearer timelines, which would be as early as fall, to have the crisis response framework in place, and then the capacity subsequently.
Honourable Member.
bon, ben, merci beaucoup.
Thank you. It would have been a worthwhile collaboration. So you're telling me that it will happen by the fall? I believe you and trust you, and I hope that you will credit the Bloc Québécois with this excellent idea, which will assist so many people in the future. Now, to date, the Canadian government has only given codes to applicants to begin the security control process, the multi-stage process. This was necessary to cross the Rafah border in Egypt. Could you explain which Gazan authorities have to deal with, authorize the members of the extended family to leave the Gaza Strip?
Mr. Chair, is a common platform with Israel and Egypt, where we have been able to really pull together all the information which is based on the delivery of codes and the applications which come to us. We have prepared a list which we work with the COGAT, and COGAT is an authority which is capable of making sure or allowing the folks in the Gaza to come out, and we need their okay for an exit. So that is the authority with which we are working with. Our head of mission in Egypt, in Cairo, our head of mission in Tel Aviv, they have all been corresponding and working closely with them to make sure that this happens.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Bruno de Sapp.
C'est fini? Okay, merci.
Thank you. And we will go to Madam Kwan. Madam Kwan, go ahead for 6 minutes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to point out the differential treatment. Both the minister and officials have just said that a cap had to be put in place because the government does not know how many people would utilize this program. But yet for the Ukrainian initiative for Kuwait, there was no cap, and the government didn't know how many people would utilize that program. Why the differential treatment?
For the purpose of specifically and I'll take the example of Gaza, we are wanting to make sure that, as Minister mentioned also, to see if we are able to get the people out from where they are. And as it becomes more clear that we are able to facilitate that movement or that movement happens, we are wanting to make sure that we are increasing that. At that time, it was mostly defined to do a very quick adjustment in terms of bringing or providing a safe place for the Palestinians who were trapped in that war situation.
Well, the government would be able to achieve the same thing without putting a cap in place. And by putting a cap in place, the government has delayed the processing of the application process. So when was the last code issued by the department to reach that 986, I believe it was, prior to the expansion announcement?
Deputy Minister.
So the last, as Minister pointed out, Mr. Chair, that the department has continued to actually send codes out. My department tells me, and my folks have told me, that as late as Friday of last week, we had sent out codes too. And I believe... And
Sorry, I think you misunderstood my question. What was the date in which the government reached the 986 codes? When was the 986th code issued?
Deputy Minister.
Let me clarify that what I was getting to is 986 is not the code. 986 is the number of applicants in the system who have received the code and actually applied with an application.
Well,
Codes
yes.
are in much higher number.
Yes, so then when the department processed those 986 applications, and then to which they get codes with them, then what was the date? What was the date to which that last application was processed and received the code?
Deputy Minister.
Mr. Chair, can I please clarify something because there is a confusion
Sure, I'll stop the watch and Madam Kwan, please go ahead.
So there is a confusion about whether the codes trigger the application. So as I started to explain earlier, there is a process in which, first of all, the web form is actually through that is applied. A code is issued. Code triggers a way to actually submit a TRV application. And each applicant needs to have one application. So that we issued around 1,600 to 2,000 codes already, for which we got around 200, for which we got application which we started to completely process, and we are at 986. And we will continue to do that.
I'll start the watch. Madam Kwan, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I can tell you, in my office, I have a list of 2,500 applicants, extended family members who've submitted their application to come to Canada to safety, of which 2,000 of them have yet to receive a code. Without receiving the code, they cannot move into the next phase of the processing application. So I believe that the 1,000 cap has blocked those 2,000, at least those 2,000 people in moving forward with the application. Now, the government says they're now lifting, no, I'm sorry, the minister said he's not lifting the cap, but expanding it. But he would not give a number as to what that expansion is. So what is the expansion of that number? Will those 2,000 people who are still waiting for the application to be processed to get a code be able to get one?
Deputy Minister, please go ahead.
So as Minister pointed out, that the aspect of expanding or facilitation is mostly based on the fact that are we able to get people out from that? We have 986 complete applications where we have been unable to secure the people to come out, even though we're working every single day with Israel and Egypt.
If that's the approach, then the government may as well just give up and go home. Because so far, you have brought nobody, not one person has come out of the government's process. So that is a false answer. I'm sorry. It doesn't even make any sense to suggest that. Then we're just going to pause and see how we do. Because so far, you have not been able to get one person out. If that's the case, then go home. But that cannot be the process. And the minimum process the government has to do is to facilitate the people here in getting through all the Canadian bureaucracy so that they can move on to the next phase. But by having this cap, it is preventing people in moving forward into that next phase so that they be ready to move forward. Now, on this, so this is what I'm hearing from the government. and the government is not doing everything they can to move this process as quickly as possible for people. Isn't that the case? So now I want to ask the officials this question. We know that other jurisdictions, other countries have been able to move this forward. They have been able to get the visas issued. Canada has not issued one TRVs for people. So others have been able to do so. How is it that they have been able to do so? Is Canada talking to those other countries and their officials about what they're doing to facilitate their process?
Deputy Minister, you have 12 seconds to answer.
Mr. Chair, Canada is the first country with this public policy where we have actually put in place something which is for the facilitated measure for extended family members. No other country has this program, and any cases, whether they are from Australia and others, are consular cases. None of them have been able to get out as an extended family member or eligibility which we have been defined. And Canada stays working with Israel, working with Egypt on that one, and that is where the focus is, to get the people out and continue to work and even expand this program as Minister mentioned.
Thank you very much, Madam Kwan and Deputy Minister. I'll go to Mr. McLean. Mr. McLean, go ahead for 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to all my colleagues around the table for asking so many excellent questions about the process involved in getting people out of Gaza at this point in time, because it is a mix that we cannot figure out right now, and many people are dialing our offices saying they're stuck in the process. So thank you, everyone. But I do need to ask some questions about Sudan as well. So with respect here to everybody that's come along the way from representing people in Gaza, thank you for all your questions here as well. But Sudan, I mean, how do you get to 3,250 applicants available to come to Canada from Sudan, first of all?
Honourable Deputy Minister.
So, Mr. Chair, so we have, as mentioned earlier, we have actually started with both. When the conflict broke out, we started with the assisted departures, and we continued to work towards a program which was announced in February of this year, and that had a 3,250 as a cap. But we expect that over 5,000 people would be actually coming through that, and that because of the fact that each of the applicant may have further other dependents on that.
Honourable Member, go ahead, please.
So, okay, you're telling us that 3,250 is the cap, but you're saying that it's a fluid cap. It'll actually be there will be dependents that come with that or bring other people with them after that. So it's not a hard cap. It's actually a soft cap, if you will. Can you also, so if you could confirm or deny, but can you also tell us where that number is at this point in time? How many have come in from Sudan?
Deputy Minister, please go ahead.
So just to make sure that this was captured rightly, 3,250 is the number of applications. That is the cap. The number of people who can come under each application could be more, and that is why I'm saying around more than 5,000 could be actually. I have also the number in terms of what is the Sudan, how many applications which we have received as such. If you want, I would be able to explain it to you, sir, right now.
Number?
Yeah. So applications which were submitted until now are almost 2,800, rough estimate, and out of which we have a complete applications which we have confirmed with Anchor Air and everything else, as it stands around 458.
Thank you.
Remember.
Okay. You've got 3 countries here that people have fled. So you're really not dealing with people in Sudan right now. You're dealing with people in the neighboring countries because they're fleeing Sudan. And that includes, of course, Chad and South Sudan and Egypt. Egypt's the common link here between these 2 very difficult situations. Do you have people on the ground in Egypt that are facilitating? I mean, Canadian personnel on the ground in Egypt that are facilitating. How many people do we have, and how are they actually working to get this through the Egyptian government? And is there a translation to how that works for the people that need to come from Gaza as well?
Deputy Minister.
So, Mr. Chair, we do have a presence on the ground in Egypt. We have an embassy in Cairo where we have immigration officials who are working as both with Gaza as well as the Sudan piece. There are, because we have a global case management system, we can actually work throughout our network, and some of these applications might be actually done in Jordan or any other place also. And as far as the major caseload is concerned, it's very right that we have different countries which form a cohort of that, which includes Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Uganda, and other countries. These are some of the applicants who are actually have a different country of residence, and they are a part of this cohort, which we are seeing at this point.
Well, thank you very much. One of the things is when you look at all these processes, one thing you do is you actually nail yourself to an order. What is the process when you actually go through the application here, step by step? I mean, the worst thing we do here is give people false hope and make them jump through a whole bunch of hoops that they're never going to get through. So if you look at all the hurdles that everybody has to go through here, can you put it down in an actual operational spreadsheet, if you will, a Gantt chart, whatever? Here's what happens. Here's our timeline on that. Here's where we need to respond. Here's the other officials you have to get to at that point in time. Is that something you can provide clarity to all the people that are applying?
You have 8 seconds to reply. Deputy Minister, please go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, we have a very refined program in terms of, getting the completed applications, the work which is entailed in making sure the eligibility and admissibility is done. This is a permanent resident program. We have a very defined process with which we go. This is also now a special, aspect of that. And we have a timeline which would actually be more defined in such a way that it could take, depending upon what we have, all the information, it could take by the end of this year or early next year actual arrivals happening.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. McClan and Deputy Minister. So we will go to Mr. Ali. Mr. Ali, go ahead for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the officials for being here. I agree with Mr. McLean, my colleague. He said we should not give a false hope to the people who are already in that devastating situation. So through you, Mr. Chair, to Deputy Minister. One of my constituents, Ms. Bisan Khalif, who's present here today's committee, has 15 immediate family members in Gaza, parents and siblings, plus their families, spouse, and kids. They have all applied. 6 of them had received G codes through the special Gaza stream. A few also received biometric instructions, but they were not able to complete them as they had to go to Egypt to do them, and nobody was allowed to leave or cross the borders. Then one member of the family, my constituent's brother, escaped to Egypt by paying a certain amount of money. Now that he's in Egypt, he's been advised by your office to apply for a regular TRV from Egypt and to flag it as a critical urgent case through the web form for web form request. My question is to you: how is it that someone can pay money to cross the border from Gaza to Egypt, but our government can't get Canadians' families out? Who's making money off those bags? I just have a few more things, and then just so you can summarize it. Who's making money off the backs of the refugees? Why has our government been able to get the same access to the list of the people permitted to exit Gaza when other countries have been able to do so? And at the end, my question is, are we all Canadians have the same status? Are we all have the same privilege? Thank you.
Deputy Minister, please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'd start by saying that, first of all, we have put a lot of effort in working with the Egyptian and Israeli authorities in terms of submitting our list through COGAT to get the people out of Gaza. There are different ways. We do hear about that, people using different measures, different ways, whether they are paying, whether they're doing, and they are coming out. We, as Government of Canada, are continuing to work with the authorities so that we can put some effort and bring them out. So that is where our focus has been. As such, we have had not a success, as Minister pointed out. The folks who have actually come out have come out on their own. In relation to anyone who is out and he or she is trying to apply for a TRV, it is a process in which they will not be captured through the public policy because they don't have code. However, this is a flexibility, and this is an authority which is vested in our officers who are actually taking into consideration the humanitarian and the compassionate part of it, and certainly looking at by case basis, and very much leaning forward to make sure that we can actually provide an easy access through TRV. So this, again, as I said, is not carte blanche, but case by case. But our officers have the ability to use the compassionate and humanitarian situation as they deem fit and do that. And finally, to your point, as a question was asked through you, Mr. Chair, that to us, our focus has been really to figure out how best we can support the community which is trapped in Gaza through our efforts, which are diplomatic efforts, bureaucratic efforts.
Sorry, Chair.
I'll stop the watch and let the Deputy Minister finish.
I was just going to say, and we have put a lot of effort on that one, as said earlier mentioned, and we will continue to work our diplomatic channels as such.
Thank you. Honourable Member, go ahead. Quick question.
Chair, I have 30 seconds to give it to Mr. Nate as well, so my colleague, and then
I think then we should start with Mr. Arsene Smith. Go ahead, please.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. My understanding is there are about 2,367 applications. We've completed 900, but 300 have been submitted. The minister said, unfortunately, it's not in our control. It's immensely frustrating. So whose control? Who has that control, and where should Canadians who are so frustrated be directing that immense frustration?
But Deputy Minister or Assistant Deputy Minister, you can answer the question.
So just to clarify, Chair, that 2,300 are the codes out there. We have 986 applications.
I'll stop the watch and I'll go back to Mr. Arsene Smith. Please clarify.
No, the core question is there are 300 applications that you have submitted. 900 have been completed, as I understand it. But I take your point, 2,367 codes that are out there of people that have expressed an interest here. Having said that, the question remains, if it's not in our control and we are immensely frustrated, where should we be directing that frustration? Who has the ultimate control here?
Thank you. Deputy Minister, go ahead, please.
The control is, as I mentioned earlier, is with COGAT, which is the authority, which is the Israeli authority, which has to give the exit for the people of Gaza who are trapped in that place.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The time is up, and it's my understanding that my dear friend Brunel de Sepp is giving his time to Mr. Morris. Is that correct? Good. So, Mr. Morris, please go ahead, 2.5 minutes.
Merci encore, Monsieur Brunel de Sepp.
Thank you again, Mr. Brunel de Sepp.
Deputy Minister, appreciate you being here. I'd encourage you, if you have a chance, to stick around afterwards to hear from some of the Palestinian Canadians in this room who, to your claim of other countries not being successful of having folks get out of Gaza, have, in my view, some pretty strong evidence that that's not the case. I'd encourage you to hear from them directly. I'd like to follow up on a mother of Maha and Saja from my community. I provided a letter to the minister about their case back on February 12th, again on February 27th. She has a TRV already. My question to the minister, my question to you, why is it that she's not been able to get out with a TRV already?
Honorable Deputy Minister, go ahead, please.
So, Mr. Chair, the TRV, if the person has a TRV and they are outside of Gaza, for TRV to, sorry, I'll just, yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the question. The TRV, which is in Gaza, is probably not through the public policy. It is, they have a TRV as such.
Honorable Member, is that the intention?
It's a temporary resident visa
So,
issued by the Government of Canada
Yes,
with confirmation from IRCC officials already.
Yep.
I'd just like to understand, is it, as you just responded to my colleague, Mr. Ernst-Kind-Smith, that we need to get her onto the COGAT list? Does she need to get onto an evacuation list? What list do we need to advocate for her to get on, given she already has a TRV?
I'll start the watch. Deputy Minister, go ahead, please.
The COGAT list, to very clearly point out, is the one which is under public policy. But however, the work has to be done through the Israeli authorities to actually allow her to come out and be here.
Including for those who, at the end of the access code process, ideally would get a TRV. This person already has that TRV. That remains the case for her as well, and everyone else in her same position too.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, Mr. Chair, that our span of control, our reach does not go into the country itself, and it is under the Israeli command that they would be allowing them to come. TRV guarantees the entry into Canada. TRV does not guarantee an exit from that place, which is where she is.
Honorable Member, you have 20 seconds.
I'd suggest that's where we need to place far more effort in that case, given we're giving out these access codes, and even if they're successful with the access codes, we have no way of getting people out, even if they are successful in finally getting a TRV, which we've learned is extremely difficult already. I'd like to follow up on Sudan as well, but maybe we can have a conversation after this because I just ran out of time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Morris. I'll go to Madam Kwan. Madam Kwan, you have 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Just want to follow up on the notion that other countries have not been able to get people out when, in fact, it is absolutely incorrect. Family members here have lists upon lists of individuals who have actually gotten out. In fact, one family member said her friend is able to get her extended family members out across the Rafah border and then to board a plane. In fact, they're about to board a plane to go to Australia. So this is absolutely untrue, and it is so disturbing to know that IRCC officials have no idea that this is happening and what other jurisdictions are doing to facilitate this process. So I would absolutely ask the officials to go back and do their homework, and then to come back to report back to our committee about what it is that the other jurisdictions are doing and how is it that Canada is not achieving the same kind of result. I just heard the officials confirmed that people who cannot get through the official special immigration program to get their TRVs and to get to safety are now being asked to make a separate application for them to use unofficial channels and to make a separate application outside of this program. How is this is even possible for this to be taking place? So is the government effectively saying that their program is ineffective and people should use whatever channel that they can access to try to get to safety?
Deputy Minister, please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, just for records, I did not say that they should use any other channel. What I am actually mentioning is that the way anyone who is able to get out still needs to put in an application for a temporary resident visa. If they are not covered in public policy and they have been able to secure to come to Rafah to come to Canada, they will have to apply for a temporary resident visa.
Oh, I understand that. But we just heard from a member of parliament who were told by IRCC that they should, people who went through unofficial channels should be making a TRV to IRCC and then to mark to say that it should be expedited in their processing. That is trying to bypass the existing program. Effectively, that advice is to say that this existing program is ineffective. The chaos that's going on there is shocking. I just talked to a family member, if I can just finish with this, Mr. Chair, that they apply with the opening and they got 5 codes from the same family members that already got codes. Other family member got codes for other family units that's not related to them. This is the level of chaos that's going on, by the way, with IRCC, with this program.
Madam Kwan, your time is up. Deputy Minister, I'll give you the time if you want to respond. Otherwise, you don't need to because the time is up right now.
Mr. Chair, we will take back into looking at if there are any concerns with the code, and we will look into that in our operational model.
If there's anything else, officials, you want to say, otherwise, I want to thank you on behalf of the committee as a chair. Thank you for appearing and be with us. With that, it's 6:30. 7:30.
Before you adjourn, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move a motion, please.
Sure, go ahead.
That pursuant to Standing Order 1028, the committee invite the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, Canada, IRCC, close bracket, to return before the committee for 2 hours to discuss the temporary immigration measures initiated in response to the ongoing conflicts in Sudan and Gaza, and that this ministerial appearance be prioritized above all other appearances. And further that, if officials be invited to return to this committee for an hour.
Thank you very much, officials. You can go, and the motion is on the floor, and it is 7:30. Because I said we will be adjourning the meeting at 7:30. Is the will of the committee to go ahead or to adjourn? Adjourn?
We want to vote on her motion.
Adjourn? There is a motion. You want to bring the motion on to adjourn?
Sorry, Chair, isn't you need permission to go beyond the 7:30? Do we have the resources to continue?
We do have unlimited resources tonight.
But
Let's just
Point of order, Mr. Chair. It is the practice of this committee that when we get interrupted in the work that we do get extended time. Are you telling us that we don't have that extended time to debate this motion?
I'm telling you that I will continue unless there is a motion on the floor to adjourn the meeting.
There is no such motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, if there's no such motion, we will continue, okay? So, Mr. Kimmich.
So, Chair, I'd be fine voting to return the minister because we did lose quite a bit of time today. But the motion says above all other appearances. And I believe that we have the minister also called for the sub-estimate C, our Hong Kong pensions issue that is urgent. We also have it for immigration levels, and Parliament has passed a motion asking the minister to redo his work, and very likely we will be past the deadline set by the House on redoing the immigration levels targets plan. We've also called him to reappear on the Auditor General's report, and we've also passed another motion for the minister to return specifically because of testimony that was contradicted by media news articles, testimony given before the committee on the organized crime issue facing Mexican nationals. So I'm good with voting for the motion if we could just remove the portion that says above all other meetings, and then we'll vote for.
Okay. Madam Kwan, do we have the consent to do that?
No. You can put that to a vote if the member is moving that as an amendment. But I'll tell you this, though, speaking to the issue, Mr. Chair, the reality is this. People are dying as we speak. People are dying. I just spoke to a constituent of mine who lost 3 members of his family, of which one is a child. I cannot underscore the urgency of this situation. I get it that there are a whole bunch of other things to which we need the minister to come before the committee to discuss with us. I want that too. On the Hong Kong motion, on all of those, absolutely. But none as urgent as this current situation where every single second of the day it matters. We just heard from officials and the minister that not one person through this program has been brought to safety. How is that even possible when other jurisdictions are doing it? We just heard from officials to say that they have no knowledge of how other jurisdictions have done this.
Thank you.
So, no, I'm not finished,
Okay,
Mr.
go
Chair.
ahead. Carry on.
So, no, we have to prioritize this. And the last time when I moved this motion and called for the minister and officials to come before the committee as a priority, we had a situation where the minister wasn't able to do that, and we delayed. We actually had the issue on international students on fraud come before this. Time is of the essence, Mr. Chair. We need for the minister to come before us. There's been shifts and changes to this program. The minister, just before now, also blamed the NDP for the motion, for the failure of their program. And that's what they said to CBC. It is shocking to me. There's a lot to which the minister needs to answer for, and we need him back at this committee.
Mr. Are you done? Madam Kwan? Yeah. Okay, so I have the speaking list. I have Mr. Ali, then Ms. Kaibaga, or Mr. McLean, you wanted to go ahead too?
No, I was going to say that there's recording going on of the meeting right now.
Sorry, what?
It's still a public meeting.
Yeah. It's a public meeting. Okay, so Mr. Ali, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Ms. Kwan, and it's surprising to see my conservative colleagues. For them, this is not an urgent situation. People are dying every day. Kids are dying every day. People are at risk. Canadians are at risk. They voted against the ceasefire, and here we come.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
This is not.
Point of order right now, Mr. Ali, to entertain. Mr. McLean, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I don't know where Mr. Ali is actually getting any of that information. Thank you very much. We are here waiting for the minister's attendance. It's a question of what he attends at, and we know it's urgent. So thank you very much for his intervention, but I'd like his intervention to actually be based on the facts, please.
Thank you. Mr. Ali, go ahead, please.
The fact is that Conservative voted against the ceasefire. The fact is they want to bring Hong Kong or other issues on top of this Gaza issue, whereas Ms. Kwan is asking that minister would come and answer questions on the Gaza issue. So that is the fact. And I agree with this motion, and I would support that. Thank you.
I have Ms. Kaibaga and then Mr. Reddycop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was actually just going to propose that we eventually get to voting so that we already been here for a while and we're trying to be efficient. There are a lot of people who are, come from far and are ready to go home. I, like my colleague Jenny said, this is a really important motion that we have to vote on. It is important that we give it utmost attention. I support her entire motion without removing or adding anything. But I do have to say also that I want to clarify some of the comments that the minister said earlier, because I had the opportunity to have the conversation with him around the motion that we all voted except for the Conservatives, who want to also continue to delay. And he did say that the motion has made it complicated. He's not blaming anybody because he wouldn't have voted for it if he was in the position to blame, but it has complicated the relationships.
Shameful.
The diplomatic relationships. But that being said, we all care about this issue, both for the Sudanese communities from our ridings and across the country and outside this country, and for the Gazan families that are both here online and in our communities that are watching. And I would really implore my colleagues to support this motion so we can actually get out of here in a timely manner. Thanks.
Thank you. I have Mr. Reddycop. Mr. Reddycop, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I agree we should vote. And just before we do, I just want to say that the soonest we can do this would be the week of April 8th, probably April 10th. So the other option that we do have is to just try to sneak in a special meeting as well, because it is an important issue. And of course, there are many important issues, the Hong Kong situation, many other things that are on our minds here. So that's another option. So anyway, just throw that out there, but I'm fine to vote on this.
Thank you. If there's no more speakers on the list, I'm going to ask clerk to take a vote. Is there a unanimous consent?
Can the clerk?
Seems like there is a unanimous consent. Yes. So with that, the motion is passed, and I can adjourn the meeting now. Is there a, okay?
Anything? Okay.
Okay, there is a consensus to adjourn. Meeting is adjourned here.